Alright, welcome back everyone. Got another video today, but first of all, just wanted to thank you for getting to 100 subscribers. We've had a lot more views on the channel recently, so thanks for tuning in, and I love reading all your comments, so make sure to leave some in this video too. Today, I'm answering the question, or trying to answer the question, can you be naturally fat? As you can see upon your screens now, there are a bunch of these naturally fat posts, and they're 10 a penny in the world of fat activism. Claiming to be naturally fat is practically a requirement of the fat acceptance movement, and creating posts like these must be part of the initiation ceremony. There are plenty of people who have heard phrases such as naturally thin, and had the mental wherewithal to see them for what they are. Very simple descriptors of variation within human genetics. The thing is, not everyone is quite as intelligent, and instead extrapolate the meaning so much that it includes morbid obese people. Fat activists are pretty damn good at extrapolating. The bigger the better, am I right? While some people may seem naturally thin due to the fact that they seem to eat a lot, or claim to at least, this doesn't tell the full story. For example, a fit person talking about eating like a horse will likely imagine a totally different volume of food than a super fat. What may be called a meal by someone who is a healthy weight may be called a snack by a super fat, and even if they do consume more calories than average, they will most likely have to counteract this by having a more active lifestyle. The type of body positive fat activist that I often discuss on this channel would practically combust upon entry to a gym and claims that exercise is fat phobic. Therefore, the chances of them joining in or watching someone else's fitness routine are slim. Oh, fine, I'll stop with all the fat jokes. I can't promise anything though. To put things very bluntly, only a philosophical solipsist. Wow, try saying that while you're drunk. Or someone who is extremely self-centered would be unable to realise that people continue to exist when you're not watching them. Unless you know their diet, caloric intake, daily caloric maintenance, or exercise level, there is only so much you can know. Fat activists may overindulge in weapon-grade copium and claim that none of the factors I just mentioned contribute to weight whatsoever. It's all about genetics and metabolism. In my last video, I mentioned the fact that metabolism is slow enough to cause 200 plus pounds of unwarranted weight gain would likely kill you, and that stands up here too. If a person has a severe enough genetic condition or a very overactive metabolism that truly did allow them to eat thousands of excess calories a day without gaining weight, they would most likely suffer from a range of other symptoms. Graves' disease, for example, causes hyperthyroidism rather than hypothyroidism, causing the metabolism to speed up, and it doesn't take a genius or a biologist to look up the many adverse symptoms of hypothyroidism since we are living in the information age. On the subject of genetics, the person in this post is claiming that being naturally fat is not only possible, but the result of rapid evolution. Not just this, but in an award-winningly Dunning-Kruger moment, they make the very bold claim that if you don't agree with their half-baked theory, you are at least subconsciously an evolution denier. Which basically means that you're a crazy tinfoil hat-wearing conspiracy theorist, as well as the usual suspects, fat-phobic, racist, misogynistic, and whatever else they want to throw. As you possibly know by now, I love biology, and whilst I'm not an expert by any means, evolution and genetics was quite a large component of my A-level biology course. For all my American viewers, A-level is basically the same as a college degree. Evolution happens extremely slowly in the vast majority of cases, unless the circumstances are rare and often quite extreme. The reason it is so slow is because evolution can only happen after a mutated gene is successfully passed down the generations, and this usually only happens when the gene is beneficial to the survival of the organism. The animals living within the ruins of Chernobyl, for example, have shown some rapid evolution, but this is because the radiation fallout created such a harsh environment that it killed the organisms that didn't have genetic advantages, and radiation has been shown to cause an increase in genetic mutations anyway. These animals also reproduce much faster than humans, since most people will not reproduce until they're at least 18, with the average age of a first-time mother being as high as 32 in the UK as of 2024. In the space of 100 years, that means only 3 or 4 generations could be created, and the proliferation of a hypothetical obesity gene could not possibly rise in line with obesity rates. Also, obesity is at its highest in developed countries due to a very efficient means of food production. Remember how I said that evolution favours beneficial genes? Well, please explain to me why we would need to desperately mutate and proliferate a gene for obesity in developed countries at a time when food availability has never been better. With the number of well documented obesity related diseases, I genuinely cannot see how we would need to rapidly evolve to be obese in an environment that creates obesity at very high rates as it is. Surely famine stricken populations would have evolved this obesity gene by now, but lo and behold, they haven't. Others may claim that obesity is genetic due to the fact that some genetic disorders are strongly correlated with obesity. This is very bloody rich coming from the group with an ideology hinging solely upon the idea that correlation doesn't equal causation. But if I pointed out every single time that the haze and fat activist community contradicted itself, this video would be many, many hours long. Prader-Willi syndrome has been correlated very strongly with obesity, but this is because the disorder has caused an insatiable appetite from early childhood, possibly because of problems with the hypothalamus. Some non-syndromic cases of early onset obesity do have genetic factors at play, as it has been estimated that 10% of extreme cases are linked to genetic abnormalities, many of which affect the hypothalamus and its role in hunger. There are a few more syndromic genetic causes listed in the paper I read to get this information, and it's a really interesting read, so I've linked it in the description. Overall, research is suggesting that non-syndromic obesity genes lead to obesity due to a dysregulation of hunger, and other genetic factors are often polygenetic, meaning that they interact with a number of other genes and therefore cannot be solely blamed for obesity. To further hammer home the fact that obesity isn't inherent to human populations, we must look back through history. Anybody alive in the 80s or who has fantastic taste in entertainment like me may have seen the HTV series Robin of Sherwood. I do promise that this is relevant. This is a series set in pre-industrial England in the 1100s, a time when food was not as readily produced and distributed as it is now. Anybody familiar with this story will know the character Friar Tuck, who is, of course, a rather plump gentleman, and this got me thinking about the history of obesity. Obesity was not prevalent in pre-industrial populations, and the average person was thin due to the fact that food was not as readily available as it is now, and the lack of modern industrial technology meant that the most basic survival tasks required a lot more effort than they do now. In order to eat, the average person would have to maintain the land in order to grow and harvest food. In order to shelter, they would have to build and maintain their homes and settlements. All of this necessary work was very labour intensive, leading to an increased caloric output. The idea of calories in, calories out is really bloody basic, and this is a principle that people use in order to alter or manage their weight. The average sedentary person will have a drastically lower caloric output, meaning that they would gain weight if they ate the same amount of calories as the average manual labourer. The average pre-industrial person would also be living off simple and non-processed foods such as vegetables, grain, and poultry, since these were some of the most energy-efficient foods to produce. However, those who were higher on the social ladder would have access to more luxurious and calorie-dense foods such as red meat. Alcohol consumption during the Middle Ages was also very common, and those of a higher social standing would have more access to it. Nobles, monks, nuns, and other wealthy people additionally worked jobs that weren't as energy intensive, as they were seen as being above manual labour in a lot of cases. Due to the sedentary and indulgent nature of their lives, obesity was most frequently seen in these groups. Monks, such as Friar Tuck, had a relatively high social standing within medieval Christian societies, meaning that they too were able to live more indulgent lifestyles. In fact, obesity in monks and nuns was something of a stereotype during the Middle Ages. A 2014 study by archaeologist Pip Patrick showed that monks were 5 to 6 times more likely than the average person at the time to develop osteoarthritis and 3 times more likely to develop diffuse idiopathic skeletal hyperostosis, otherwise known as dish disease. Both of these disorders are known to be obesity related, and the skeletons of the monks had a taller than average stature, which indicates an abundance of nutrition. It is speculated that obesity was documented earlier than this, as some Venus figurines were voluptuous. However, the majority of similar figurines were slender. One such figure that is often cited as proof of innate human obesity is the Venus of Willendorf, but the artistic meaning behind the sculpture is widely disputed since we have little archaeological context to work with. One theory is that this was the creation of a man who was sexually attracted to bigger women, but another is that these sculptures were created by pregnant women as a way of representing their perception of their changing bodies. Art is able to represent much more than the objective physical truth, and this may be an example of this. Art genres such as Cubism and Surrealism do not perfectly capture the physical reality of the subjects, but instead aim to portray the emotion or culture of the artist or subject. If your proof of obesity being innate is quite so flimsy and open to interpretation, it is not enough to discount the evidence that shows obesity is caused by lifestyle. Overall, we can reasonably claim that obesity is not innate to humans and one cannot be naturally fat, because otherwise we wouldn't have seen the obesity rates increase so sharply in recent decades. We would instead have seen obesity rates increase proportionally to population growth, but we haven't. You may be thinking about other fat logic gems such as starvation mode or the war on Ozempic. Don't worry, I'll be making videos on both of those things too. At the end of the day, obesity may have some genetic influences in the same way that most aspects of human life do, but it doesn't remove responsibility from the person. The fact that obesity-related genes cause abnormal function in the hypothalamus, which affects appetite, also goes to show that even natural fatness is caused by overeating. Historical contexts also show that high-risk or morbid obesity rates are consistent with the calories in, calories out principle. There is, of course, so much room for variation, and it's totally possible that there are undiscovered obesity genes that cause fat to be stored in abnormally high amounts, but until the proof is there, I personally will not be believing it. To finish up, this links back to my previous video topic too. Even if one is naturally fat or has a genetic predisposition towards obesity, being very obese is still something of a choice. If you have a genetic predisposition to something that is harmful to your health, you can manage it even if this means making sacrifices. I only say something of a choice as syndromic causes such as PWS may lead to intellectual disability or emotional dysregulation that makes weight management difficult. However, the average fat activist claiming to be naturally fat most likely does not have PWS, as it is only estimated to affect 1 in 10,000 to 1 in 30,000 people. If you have a genetic predisposition that you do nothing to manage and make zero effort to circumvent the risks, you can't blame genetics here, pal. That one's on you. Thank you for watching. Put everything you think about this in the comments. Do you believe in an obesity gene? Do you not? Do you think you're naturally fat? Do you think anyone's naturally fat? But anyway, thank you for watching. Thank you for 100 subscribers. And leave any suggestions in the comments. I'll try and get onto them. And yeah, goodbye.